Welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we do have a doctor in the house from time to time, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing we say on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check in with a trusted medical professional about your own personal medical concerns.
Hello and welcome to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton and I am here with episode 118. And I got this question from Karen in my Facebook group for the podcast Keto Life Support. That's what the Facebook group is called. And it is, Kim, how do you view food now compared to how you viewed food at each stage of your journey? So great question, and I'm going to try and answer it. I think it's probably best if I start with now and then jump back. I've thought about it a little bit, and I think that's probably your best illustration. So I've talked about my journey with food, so there's definitely going to be overlap here with other podcasts, but maybe I haven't hit the specific note, and so let's go into it. You probably know if you've listened along before, but if not, welcome, new person. I once upon a time had what I called a very disordered relationship with food, where I felt very, very out of control, to the point where I was literally crying every day by the time I kind of made a real change. Ultimately, I felt plagued. I felt bedeviled, like I felt possessed by the need to eat in a way that I didn't think was okay. And that was really hard. It's very hard. I mean, I'm probably not having to tell a lot of you because you've experienced this. It's psychologically very draining to, on one hand, know what you should be doing, and on the other hand, feel completely incapable of doing it. And so that was once upon a time my experience around food. And it was a slow progression over time to change it. But I'm going to jump to now because I think that's going to make the biggest contrast and then explain how it's been incremental changes. So I'm going to give you a story. So my boyfriend and I just bought a Creami and we are sort of obsessed with it. We both like cooking and making new concoctions. And so we've been every night coming up with some new Creami recipe. If you don't know about the Creami, I'm not going to go into it here because I could go on and on and on, but it's called a Ninja Creami. You can look it up. Everybody and their cousin is talking about them. So I'm sure you've heard of them before I said the word. But I made this Creami recipe that was delicious. I'll link it in the notes. And we tasted it. It was super good. And I said, oh, I'm going to eat this for dessert because I had planned it in my day. I always plan my day in advance. So that's one thing. I still track and plan most of the time. And I had planned this Creami concoction into my day. It was a big amount. I was like, it was the big eye day, right? It was like, I want a lot of that because it's really good. So I sat down with the pint container. I'd given a little bit to my boyfriend, but I maybe had, 3/4 of the pint. And I realized, I was, oof, that's a lot. But I was like, but I want it. It's good. So I sat down with it, and about 3/4 of the way through it, I said to myself, inside my own head, I'm really actually probably pretty good here. I don't really need the rest of this, but I kept eating it because I was enjoying it. And afterwards, I stopped and I said, yeah, I really didn't need that. Now, I didn't have any hugely negative feelings about what I just ate because, one, I had planned to eat it. And two, the amount I ate after I said I'm pretty full was maybe an ounce or two of yogurt and maybe an eighth of a nectarine. So it was not a huge amount of food, but I recognized that I just was like, hey, I've served myself a lot because my eyes were bigger than my need, and I was okay with less. So the next time I made it, which was just a day or two later, I only served myself half the amount, and I put the rest away for later. Because I recognize that when something's really, really tasty and it's in my lap and I have a spoon, it's ridiculous of me to consider that I'm going to stop. I just know my boundaries. I know if you put a big plate of something that I really love in my reach, I'm going to want to keep eating it. I don't have an expectation that I am going to have some iron will around it. Now, if it would have been something incredibly filling and rich and, maybe not just an extra 50 calories, I probably would have been able to say, no, I'm done. But I would have had to actually take the leftover container and remove it from my lap, right? I wouldn't have been able to sit there with it for another hour and not have picked at it. So I am very happy with my current boundaries, is what I want to say. There were no negative repercussions that I was like, I ate a few bites past full on that. I just acknowledged it, and I made a plan that next time I would make a change to my behavior. And I was okay with that. And because I plan my days out, I don't eat things I don't mean to. I eat things that I mean to in quantities that I mean to, and I'm good with that. I'll give you another example. The other day, I was ravenously hungry for some reason. I was like, I am eating my normal plan here, and I'm way hungry. And I decided to eat a little bit more. So I added about 300 calories to my day. I was like, I'll just eat until I feel like I'm not so hungry anymore. So at the end of the day, that calculated out about 300 calories more than I usually eat. I didn't have a breakdown about it. I didn't have a big judgment about it. I said, well, that's interesting. Why was I so hungry? I don't know why I was so hungry. But the next day, I was very not hungry. And I probably ate about 300 calories less than I normally ate. And I just said, this is just the way bodies do sometimes. You get a little more hungry some days and a little less hungry some days, and it kind of works out. So the biggest change for me, I would say, is, there's several things. One is I now trust myself around food. I also trust my hunger, and I'm not freaked out about going out of control. I feel in control of my eating, and if my hunger level dictates that I want to eat more than I normally would eat, within reason, I'm going to trust that. I'm also sometimes making choices to eat foods or have a splurge that don't support weight loss, because I get to choose if I'm in a weight loss phase or I'm not in a weight loss phase. I am not obligated to stay in a weight loss phase for the rest of my life just because I weigh 10 pounds more than some arbitrary calculation says I should weigh. I get to decide. I get to be in control of these decisions. And I get to balance the way I want to live, the way I want to eat, and the way I want to look. Now, if I was very unhappy about the 10 pounds that I could probably use to lose, I would make a change because my priorities would shift, right? And I know that's all within my grasp. I don't mean it would be easy. I would probably be irritable, but I get to decide. And right now I'm deciding to eat the amount that I eat because it makes me feel satisfied and happy. And I feel happy about my relationship with food these days. Guess what my answer is. But let me explain some things here. So when I first started keto, as I mentioned, I was coming from a place where I felt completely out of control around food. I would feel like possessed to go through the drive-through and get burger and extra large fries and all of that. And it would be this inner drive within me that I felt very out of control about. When I went keto, I went super hardcore and I said to myself, I am not deviating from my plan. I'm going to plan my days. I'm going to proceed with my days on plan. I'm not stepping off the path. I'm not having cheat days. There will be no relaxing of my rules. I did allow myself to eat a little more or less if I was hungry or not hungry, but there were these foods I stuck to and I didn't go outside of my food rules. And at the time, I needed those really rigid boundaries because I had been so out of control. Right? It's like I needed, one of those heavy blankets on me. Like I needed to be tightly wrapped up. I needed to be swaddled, right? Because it felt too dangerous to have loose boundaries. And I knew about myself that if I let myself have loose boundaries at that time, I would take advantage of them in a way that would mean that everything would fall apart. I mean, I guess the way if I were coming up with an analogy, it's like If you're packing for a trip and you have a china vase, you can't just put it in a box. You got to wrap it really well, or else it's going to break in shipping. And that's a weird analogy, but that's kind of how I felt. I felt fragile. I felt delicate. And I needed to honor that with some very tight constraints. Now, over time, I would be like, oh, I'm okay here. And so what I noticed was maybe about the 2-year mark, I would let myself have a little more wiggle room. What does that mean? Well, I still ate keto. I still stayed pretty structured, but I didn't feel at risk. Like when I first started keto, my boundaries had to include, like, I can't be at a table with someone eating French fries because I will want them so badly. It will be like physically painful for me to be sitting at a table with them. Or if I went out to dinner with friends, I would have to explain to the friends that we could not have the breadbasket on the table if you wanted me to listen to your story. The breadbasket was not allowed to be within my reach if you were okay with me being distracted and upset. But you wouldn't get my full attention. Generally speaking, I'd say, is it okay if I pick the restaurant? And I would pick a restaurant where that wouldn't happen, right? I could not have things in my visual sight. If they were on your plate, I could kind of put up a boundary. But if they were in a place I could like access them and I was supposed like normal polite rules would allow me to access them, that was too much. I couldn't do that. But over time, I noticed I got okay with that. There could be a breadbasket on the table and I wouldn't feel compelled to eat from it. And I was like, oh, I'm more secure. I'm more okay here. My hunger signals are not so out of control. My mentality is not so out of control. I'm beginning to trust myself. And then, over time, my family they're not keto. And my extended family, like my parents and my cousins and my brother and his wife and his kids. So we often go out to dinner together for holidays or celebrations. And our family has a tradition that there'd be like a group dessert. So we don't order, we could. When I was eating desserts on the regular, if I wanted my own dessert, nobody would say that was a problem. But usually just the convention we would have is we'd order 3 or 4 desserts for this group of people, just pass them around and everyone would take as much as they wanted. And so I would abstain from this practice for my first couple of years of keto. Obviously, I wouldn't order anything that wasn't keto. I would quiz the restaurant. I would review the menu before I went so that I knew what to order. I would make my substitutions, all that kind of stuff. I noticed about 2 years into keto, there was a dessert that was being passed around and I thought, oh, I can make that keto. It was like a peach panna cotta or something. It was like an orange panna cotta. It was some kind of panna cotta. And I thought, oh, I bet I could make that keto, but I want to taste it and see what it tastes like so that I can recreate it. So when the plate came around and I took a bite of it and I didn't feel compelled to finish it. I had one bite and I was like, oh, that was good. That was very tasty. I think I can recreate this. And so for the next little bit, I was like, oh, I can have a bite of something and it doesn't throw me off and that's all right. And I'm just eating my keto plan and I felt, relatively stable in there. But I also felt a little bit concerned about eating more than a bite of something. And I was a little bit afraid that if I stepped outside of my boundaries, if I became more of I tried to be more of a moderator than an abstainer, that I was getting into maybe dangerous territory. And then maybe a little over 2 years ago, I made a decision to be more flexible with what I allowed myself to eat and allow more vegetables and some fruits into my diet and not stress out about what my ketone levels were and see how that felt. And so I transitioned to a place where I paid attention to my calories. I paid attention to my protein. I paid attention every day to what I was eating. I still planned my day. I put things into my tracker. It was all very controlled as I'd always been. And I found that starting to include a wider variety of foods did not cause me any problems at all. And so I became more flexible. I became more of a moderator than I had been before. Now, we don't always get to choose that. I kind of had to test and say, Can I moderate? And I was shocked to say that there reached a point where I could moderate my eating. I could have a bite. I could have 2 bites. I could have half. I could say, oh, maybe I didn't need as much as I had last night. I'm going to have less tomorrow. So I find myself now barely recognizing myself. I seem to be a moderator. I seem to be able to have control. I have a relationship with food that I'm totally fine with. I can eat things that I never used to eat before. And I get that that might be weird. And I also acknowledge that not everybody is going to end up where I am. And I also want to say that doesn't mean I'm like putting myself in a superior position. I'm saying this is where I ended up. I am as shocked as you are. And we all end up in different places. I have clients who, when I say, well, why don't you have a big salad for lunch? When they're a carnivore and they're like, I really want more vegetables. And I say, you can have a salad. And they have a salad and then they have ho-hos, right? They have ding dongs and Twinkies. They're like, just opening the door beyond 1 or 2 food items, I'm off to the races. I can't do that. I respect and honor their need for more rigid boundaries, because at the end of the day, nothing feels better than feeling sane around food. Nothing tastes better than being in control and not feeling plagued and cursed by the obsessive food thoughts in your head. So I say whatever you need to do to maintain your food sanity is the right choice to make. But for me, long term, what keeps me the most food sane I've ever felt is actually to include a wider variety of foods and to not have things on my off limits list. But there are certainly things that I would not eat regularly, because if I did, I am aware that they will contribute to ill health and they will contribute to weight gain and the kind of problems I don't want to get myself into. So I do make food choices every day to keep me in the range of weight and health that I am comfortable with. Does that mean I would say never to anything? No. If I get invited to the fanciest restaurant on the face of the planet and I am served some things, I will eat them, even if I will only eat them that one time in my entire life. But does that mean I'm going to go through the drive-thru and order the way that I used to order, with my burger with buns and fries and this and that every day like I used to do? God, no. I would never do that again. That will never be my pattern again, because I know where that led me and I'm not going there again. Does that mean I'll never order fries ever? No, it doesn't. I can include them in moderation now. And again, that's me. This is me. Somebody asked about me, so I'm giving my story. This is not to say that I expect this of everyone else. We all need boundaries. It's just that our boundaries are all going to be in different places. And I guess I've been called out on my channel before recently, where somebody said, well, if you can eat as a moderator now, you never actually had an eating disorder. And I would just say, don't do that to people. I am allowed to know what was wrong with me, right? Just like you are allowed to know where you are mentally. I know where I was, and it was a place where I was almost like institutionalized about it. It was a very, very bad place. And I think recovery is possible. I think people who have eating disorders are treated for their eating disorders and recover. But what recovery looks like for every person is different. There are anorexics who go through recovery and now eat a wide variety of foods and are very healthy. That doesn't mean they never had an eating disorder. That means that's what their recovery looks like now. There are people with binge eating disorder, which is what I had, and they can recover so they're not binging anymore. There are still negative thought patterns in my head. There are still desires that I do not indulge in. There are still things I choose not to do because I know they would break a boundary that would be dangerous for me. I simply know how to set my boundaries so I don't feel like I live in a bad neighborhood anymore, where I'm at constant fear of falling into a pit or getting into a really bad situation, because I know where to set my boundaries. Just like an alcoholic probably knows if they can go into a bar or not, or if they can hang out with that friend or not, because they can withstand this circumstance and not feel a threat from it. That we all have a different place that we can get to, and that one is not better than the other. It's what's right for you. And so I tell my story because I was asked my particular story, and I hope that's helpful for some of you to know how it looks for me. Doesn't mean it's going to look the same way for you. We all have just we are different. I know that's shocking, but that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So if you have questions, please ask them. I'm happy to answer these types of questions. And I can talk more about myself. I talk a lot about myself, but if that's what the question is, I'm happy to share. And at the same time, if you have questions not about me, I'm also happy to talk about those. So look for upcoming episodes where I answer more questions. This was definitely a personal one, my personal journey. And if that's inspirational to you, then I am grateful that I can do that. Take care and have a great week.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Keto Life Support. Want more information? Want show notes? Want to suggest a topic? Just head over to ketolifesupport.com. That's where all that kind of thing can go on. By the way, I have a request. If you could go to your podcast host and hit subscribe, we would really, really appreciate it. And what would be even more awesome is if you could write a review. And what would be even more awesome than that is if you could write like a really flattering review. Just asking, you do you. All right. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm thrilled that you're part of the Keto fam. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.